How valuable is information? This is a terribly broad question, as not all information is equal in value. For example, this is the average rainfall in Topeka. Probably not what you were expecting, and not particularly practical in card games. Quality of information is important, which hopefully this video is a source of quality information. But another key factor is the type of information. I'm going to define three classes of information: known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. Try saying that 3 times fast. Known knowns are pretty easy to understand. These are things which are explicitly communicated in some way. When an opponent summons a monster, you are completely aware of it. Pretty simple. But there is also information which has been revealed, but you do not necessarily have instant access to it. A good example is cards which flip themselves face down in Yu-Gi-Oh!, like Swarm of Scarabs or Swarm of Locusts. Since your opponent is not allowed to shuffle face down monsters, most of the time, once the monster has been revealed, it is a known known. MTG Online actually displays known knowns really well, with a revealed card remaining visible for the entirety of the match. Known unknowns are imperfect information. This might not seem to be very useful, but alongside deductive reasoning and logic, you can make informed decisions with limited information. For example, there are only 2 dangerous spiders in my region: the Black Widow and the Brown Recluse. If I find a spider like this, I can very quickly compare it to the other 2, and, though I cannot identify it, I can assert that it is not dangerous. For those who are wondering, lovely riding spiders are native to my area as well. Now, to bring it back to card games. Hearthstone is actually pretty low on gaining information about your future draws, or any of your opponent's cards for that matter. So further discussion will focus mostly on Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh!, although hand tracking is a very valuable skill in Hearthstone. So, if you were to compulsory evacuation device your opponent's monster, you would know that there exists a Gagigo in your opponent's hand, but since the hand can be shuffled at any time, you do not know which card is Gagigo. Similarly, in Hearthstone, there are cards which buff minions in hand, adding a little sparkle over the card backs. This is information that the card is a minion, but not which minion. Finally, cards in the deck are known unknowns. Since you built your deck, you know which cards are present. However, you do not know what order they will be drawn. Your opponent's deck, on the other hand, is most often an unknown unknown. Unknown unknowns are things which you are aware that you do not know. This includes private information, like your opponent's hand or deck. Even with unknown unknowns, you can still gain information, by expecting your opponent to play well and counter your combo accordingly. If your opponent has 1 blue mana up on your turn, they may be holding a narrow counterspell, like Spell Pierce. You should play your important spell first before a creature, so that if your opponent has the Spell Pierce, you will leave up enough mana to pay the tax. Always play to your outs. But it is important to remember that there are most often several options available, and an unknown card could just as easily be an unsummon, as compared to the Spell Pierce that we alluded to. So now let's contextualize information for card games in specific. For this, I will consider 3 categories: your deck, your opponent's deck, and your opponent's hand. Information on your hand should be obvious: known knowns. Information on your deck order is not very valuable on its own, as your deck is not a resource. But cards which provide information, as well as card selection like Card Advance, or even better offer you card advantage, such as the combinations of Archfiend's Oath and Convulsion of Nature, are among the best ways to use the information of the order of cards in your deck to your advantage. In Magic, the Scry mechanic exemplifies card selection based on future drawing, which can be especially important to fix your mana base in the early game. Next up is information on your opponent's deck. This is a weak way to anticipate your opponent's next move, but is generally not worth a card. Ancient Telescope or Saheeli's Silverwing give marginal benefit and could potentially be used in combination with Card Shuffle or Millstone to disrupt your opponent. But you must remember that cards in the deck are not a resource until they are drawn. Without knowledge of your opponent's hand, the incomplete information of cards in their deck is less valuable than the knowledge of cards in your deck. Finally, we have your opponent's hand. This is probably the most valuable information you can attain. Looking at your opponent's hand generally comes at a premium, with Eye of Truth giving your opponent life points each turn, or trading your life for Gitaxian Probe. Gitaxian Probe also cycles, which is why it's so powerful. But I could argue that Gitaxian Probe without the cycle would still see some play. Being able to play around your opponent's cards, such as counterspells or hand traps, makes the information valuable. But being able to preemptively deal with a threat is the real appeal of information. Targeted discard is extremely powerful disruption. Talking about information reminds me that knowledge is not power. The application of knowledge is power. Playing around threats can give you a slight advantage, but combining information with mill or discard as a disruptive maneuver can instantly swing the game in your favor. But are these tactics ethical? I will be tackling mill and discard in the next 2 videos.